Greetings, fellow Homo sapiens. I'm here today with Jamar Nolan. Jamar is an MC, author, songwriter, entrepreneur. Jamar, welcome to the program.
Man, happy to be here.
I'm super glad to have you. As we were saying a little bit earlier while we were setting up, I first kind of heard about you. A clip of yours showed up in my timeline on Facebook of you just like dropping these like mad freestyles.
Yeah.
And at the time, the way the video looked, it looked like it was just like a one-time viral video of like some really dope MC. But I decided to like look into it and like follow you, and I was like, man, this is amazing. And then I noticed that you like continued to like just on a semi-regular basis continue to just be putting out these freestyles, and I really respect that. And also related to that, kind of as a producer, you know, from this idea of just kind of like showing up to your job every day, you know, like whether or not it's for like a specific project, like just show up every day and make a beat. Show up every day, drop a freestyle, that kind of attitude. And so, I mean, can you tell me a little bit about how you started dropping those freestyles, what the thought process was of doing that?
Yeah, for sure. So like the flavors freestyle, that's what I call it, really came about just as a secondary means of content. Like, I'm not somebody who releases a ton of music throughout the year. Like there's some artists that release a song every week or every month, or I really only like to drop songs when, you know, I have something that I really want to say. But in the meantime, I'm always writing and creating and like expressing myself through my craft. So that became an easy way for me to just, you know, put something out in real time. I could record it. I could, you know, do a light edit, throw the captions of the lyrics on it and put it out within the same day or the next day. And it's kind of like carrying me over, you know, because I'm dropping sometimes once a week, twice a month or something like that. So it's pretty consistent. And it just gave me a way to also express myself on different types of beats that may not necessarily line up with where I am musically, you know, as far as creating for a project or singles or anything like that. I can just kind of have fun with it. That's really the essence of it.
Cool. I mean, it's really interesting. I relate very much to what you're saying. I mean, as a producer, sometimes, you know, like I've pretty much only been doing albums for the last, you know, several years. And I started out doing hip hop, but nowadays I mostly get to produce like rock albums and pop albums and stuff. Okay. And when I'm doing those projects, you know, like there's like a specific guideline that I have to do, and I have like, I mean, even if I'm working for any kind of artist, obviously I got to serve the purpose of the album, and that's what I'm there for, and that's what I'm getting paid for. And it's like, first of all, yeah, like an album takes such a long time that you only release it, you know, you work on it for like a year or longer in some cases, and then you put the whole thing out at once. Right. And then in the middle, you know, you don't have any content or anything to show for yourself. So there's like, on this one hand, there's this external reason where it's just as you said, like another form of content. Right. And at another level, like just the act of like nourishing yourself and expressing yourself as an artist, and without the boundaries of like, oh, like this is a specific project where I have to kind of do these specific things for whatever. Right. But so that brings me around to another thing I noticed, which is something that I find harder to relate to. But I want to hopefully learn from you, is so you have been getting a lot of placements lately.
Yes.
And in fact, you've written a book kind of about this. The name of the book is, if I'm correct, The Pen Game Portfolio. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, which is awesome. So hopefully we could talk about that as well.
For sure.
But so if you got songs that are, you know, for placements, and I kind of saw the kind of clip you made talking about your book, and so you're talking about situations where maybe somebody needs you to write a verse for them, or other types of situations where like a producer wants an MC on the track. Yep. And then earlier you were saying like if you're making your own song, you don't really want to do that kind of thing and invest in that unless you really have something to say. Right. So like is there a different like headspace or frame of mind that you go into it with for each of those different types of tasks, or is it like kind of the same for you? Like, can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, for sure. it's interesting because it is a different mind frame, but it's all coming from the same source. So it's all linked, you know? So in the case of, let's say, an artist that wants a song made, you know, I have my own process of how I make things, but I definitely have to, you know, I always ask for a briefing of like what it is that they're trying to express so that I don't write from my perspective. You know, I still have my vocabulary and my way of expressing, which, you know, if someone's listened closely enough, they might be able to trace like, that might sound something like what J Nolan would say. But you would have to really listen closely, because once you translate it into that person, it's a totally different thing. And I have to always keep in mind that this isn't for my work, you know what I mean? So it's just about getting everything that they want across. Now, in the case of a producer that's just like, you know, maybe they're putting together a project and they're looking for MCs or artists to be a part of it. You know, you can kind of ask like, hey, is there a specific idea or theme that you're going for? But for the most part, they let you, you know, be yourself in those instances. But in the case of, you know, like the television and the movie stuff, it's me, but there's certain guidelines that I have to follow in order to write those types of songs, because the film world is a bit different than the music industry, in which you know, you just never know where the project is gonna land. So sometimes you can create a song with the producer and it goes through the music supervisors and the sync companies, and you know, you just don't know where it's gonna go. So you kind of have to stay pretty generic in how you write the song. Like you can still like have the same energy as your normal self, but the beat selection may be different because there's a certain texture of tracks that fit certain themes and moods. And then there's also like the subject matter. You can't be too edgy. You can't really like toe the line with trying to, you know, I mean, sometimes as MCs, you know, you can say stuff that might be offensive, but as an artist, you can say, hey, that's just my creative license. But in those situations, you can't do that. They'll shut that down. So you have to, like I said, you have to stay pretty generic.
That's really interesting. I have found, I mean, I do a lot of side gigs that are like not directly related to music. And the reason that I do that is because I found when I would do too much commercial stuff, like I have this story that I've told on the podcast already, so I won't go into it in depth. But like I had a gig at like a Bollywood production house for like a day, and it was like it was like 5 producers there working under this main producer, and it was almost like a factory where they were just like pumping out music for like film, TV. Movies, the whole thing, and I've said it before, but it's funny enough, so I'll repeat it. Like I went in and they were like, "We want you to make here's some vocals." They recorded some vocals to some next beat, and they're like, "Here's some vocals in Punjabi, and we want you to make a new beat for this that sounds exactly like Lean On by DJ Snake, except not so much that we'll get sued." And I was like, cool. I felt lucky, like, that I had the gig, and I was like, cool, all right. And I like diligently sat down for the whole day and tried to do it. And I got to the end of the day, and like it was like not exactly what they were looking for. The vibe in the place was really weird. Like it was really friendly. I don't want to say like weird. They were all really nice people, and that was cool. But there was like this strange vibe where everybody kind of was using the same exact words to describe like feedback. If I asked like the person sitting next to me, like, what do you think? Like they almost had like this exact same sentences as this person on sitting the other side of me had. And so then when I got to the end of the day, it was like the whole time I was there for the day doing the job, I was like, I'm lucky to be here, you know, like this is cool. But then when I got home at the end of the day, I was like, man, if I do this all day, then I'm never gonna want to make like other kind of music. Like I felt so like I didn't want to open up Pro Tools, I didn't want to open up Ableton. I was like, I'd rather just like read a book. And so this is the kind of thing like why I find what you're doing interesting, because I think it's different. Like what you're saying about it all coming from the same source. Like ultimately, you are being asked to like do the job of an MC one way or another, right? And
Yeah.
like I guess there's like a much bigger spread in, like, if you're just a producer, like you could be making some like they could be asking you to make some weird music, you know, like the range and, like, you know, weird stuff they could ask you to make and like actual things I want to make is pretty wide, I guess. But that's all really interesting. You're based in Atlanta right now, correct?
Yes, sir.
Are you from Atlanta, like, or did you move to Atlanta?
I moved here when I was a kid. So, like, I was born in Connecticut.
Okay.
I lived in California for a brief time as well. And I've been raised in in Atlanta ever since I was about 8 years old.
Oh, right on. So you're like you're very much from there in a certain kind of sense. Atlanta is like this major hip hop capital, like in terms of like hip hop folklore, and you're a guy that's there as an MC. And so I'm like, I lived in Toronto for a while, and Toronto, like, for me, I grew up in a really small place. So Toronto is like especially for Canada, a very hip hop centric city. And it's more so like that now than it was maybe 10 years ago. But even like Atlanta is the kind of place where even like people in Toronto, like they will go to Atlanta for like immersive, you know, experience in hip hop culture type thing. And so as an MC in a place like Atlanta, I mean, I assume that there must be like lots of MCs, lots of producers. It just must be a lot going on. What is it like to be in that scene? Can you like maybe describe it for me? Like, I've never visited Atlanta, you know?
Absolutely. So, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. There's, like, I would say a solid 30% of the population out here probably does music.
Wow.
Because everyone is involved in music. Even people that had no musical talent in their life, they're dabbling in it because that's what's hot, you know? And then you have people that, you know, maybe they sung in the church throughout their childhood and they may have left it alone. And then since music is what's popping, you know, their friends are like, hey, you still have a good voice. Get in the studio. Mm-hmm. Then you have so many MCs. There's so many different types of MCs out here because every part of Atlanta is different. It's the same, but it's different, right? Mm-hmm. So, like Southside MCs from Atlanta, you can think of are like, you have your Ludacris's, you have your, you know, think Ludacris, and you have Outkast, who's kind of like Southwest. Mm-hmm. Then you have like Future, who's from the East Side. You have B.O.B., who's from like further out east. You know, so it's like different. Like you have your lyricists, you have your trap rappers. You have a population of backpackers who are kind of like the independent scene. And then you have everybody that's trying to make it, you know? So mm-hmm. it's a ton of artists. Everywhere you go, any neighborhood you're in, somebody's probably recording music next door to me right now. Seriously.
That's epic. I mean, that's something I'm trying to imagine, and like the sort of different styles that you were mentioning, especially based on like the different parts of Atlanta. Like, yeah, I really like, for me, the big Atlanta reference. I'm like an older guy at this point, I guess, but like for me, I came up on Goody Mob albums and Outkast albums, and like what the organized noise, what those guys are doing, and I like have lost track of like a lot of what's going on now, but. Like in that music, especially, since they were, I guess they were probably not the first, but like the very early big acts to come from there. Yeah, they in their lyrics had they felt such a need to like express and explain their local area. So like all the shout outs to like, you know, places like, for example, I've never been to Atlanta, but I just like know there's a place, College Park. I don't know what it means, but I just know that it exists. You know what I mean? And yep. I can probably like go through the Outkast and Goody Mob lyrics and remember these place names. And so it's interesting to hear you, like, even though I have no map or frame of reference in my mind, but like when you're describing these different like localities and how there's kind of a difference, that's really interesting to me. In Toronto. Like I haven't lived there in about 5 years, but like there are lots of different kind of MCs, but I never noticed maybe this regional kind of, you know, within the city. Although I think that's emerging now, like in the suburbs, there's like certain suburb that has like a certain sound, or whatever. Another interesting thing is you were talking about these like lyricists, trap rappers, and backpackers, which is like, that's something I don't associate so much with Atlanta, but I guess it exists. What's the commingling like in these different scenes? Like, does that even mean anything? Like, is that even a sensible question?
No, that's very sensible, because with each category, it comes with its own scene, right? So like, if you're like in the trap realm, you may hit some of the same venues as like the backpackers or the lyricists, but you're not going to be going there very long. You know what I'm saying? You're just like going there to kind of get in front of people.
Yeah.
But there's select venues that are made as like the breeding grounds for the future of trap artists.
Oh, right.
Right? You have people like T.I. and affiliates of T.I. in the city who are actively putting on showcases or have clubs that are the home of these showcases, to where that's where you gotta go if that's the lane you're in. You have your Migos and your QC who's always looking for talent. So that's that. And then you have like for the backpackers and the indie artists, there's like, specific lounges, specific places where you can go do those things, and it's like you're mingling with like-minded individuals. And like I said, the trap folks look like they'll come through there, but not very long. And it's the same thing for the other way around. Like you have your MCs, your lyricists that, just to break outside of the same people that they always see, they're going to go to these other places, these other clubs. But the thing about it is that style of music, unless you're like really talented and know how to like bridge the gap between those two worlds, you kind of get laughed out the building if you come on some lyrical stuff, because it's like, bro, you shouldn't have came here with that. Not to come here with that. It's no disrespect, but what you was coming into. So
that's mind blowing to me. Like, that's super interesting, because in here I was just like I was saying, I was at a hip hop showcase last night, and the interesting thing that's happened here in India is that from the time, like, I moved here in 2015. Beginning of 2015, and since that time, like, the hip hop scene in India has exploded. Like, it's like, I assume that, like, the scene has been there for like a long time, for you in Atlanta, right? Like, but
right.
What I've been watching here is like, how you hear about like the early days of hip hop, like in Queens and I guess Brooklyn, or my hip hop history is not very perfect, but
yeah, I got you. Queens, Brooklyn, started in the Bronx and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and you hear those stories, right, about like a new, like a straight up new thing, kind of like coming into existence over like a span of some years. That is kind of like what's finally happened with hip hop in India, where like when I first moved here, like the only things you would hear about were like really like it was from the Bollywood side, where it was just a knockoff. Like, is exactly what you would expect if like a foreign country, like, you just saw a part of your culture and was like, we will make a version of this, like, it was quite bad.
Yeah.
But then, like, just like kind of how hip hop is supposed to be, it's like supposed to be like authentic representation of like culture, like the people. So it's like when that kind of thing started to emerge, and now it's really blowing up. And but the reason why I kind of go into that is because, like, I've never experienced like these explicitly these kind of like very like lanes like you were talking about. Like, for example, the showcase I was at last night, because of the nature of where hip hop is at in India, like, you have all these different types of hip hop artists, different languages. Like, last night I saw English rap, Tamil rap, Hindi rap, all these different, I think Kashmiri rap, all on the same stage, and they kind of all have to, band together as a team, because it's like the one kind of hip hop scene. Whereas, like, what you're describing is like these specific lanes. And so how much of that is like just how it probably should be and is going to be because of differences in the crowds and stuff? And how much of that is maybe like negative? What do you think about that?
I think that essentially what you guys have out there is how it should be, right? Because everybody is really kind of trying to do the same thing. Even though you're doing it differently, you're trying to accomplish the same goal. So you should be peers. You should be interacting with each other, because you just never know what the next person has access to, how they could help you, or what that relationship would just be like for y'all to just be people outside of music. But I think for us out here, it's just the natural evolution, because it's already been here so long.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like finding that comfort zone, or finding your community within the community, right? So that's what ends up happening, because this place out, Atlanta is so inundated with music and hip hop that, you kind of have to find your own lane and find your own niche within the market, because if you go for such a broad scope, you're going to end up basically trying to please everyone in some type of way.
Yeah.
And when you're coming out, that's one of the main things people in the music business will tell you not to do, is like, you can't be trying to please everybody. If you're good at something, you should just do that until it works.
Yeah.
Then you can branch out later. So, in a nutshell, I just think that, like I said, what you guys have is the essence of what hip hop should be. But out here, we're so accustomed to it that you have to find your own way in order to survive.
Yeah. It's you said a lot there that's like really interesting. Definitely the idea that like over time, like such a thing is bound to develop in a scene. Like obviously, the longer something exists, the more it's going to branch out. But I also like what you said about like people outside, being people outside of music, and how music and sharing music can it points to the idea that like sharing different kinds of music is a way of bringing people together, right? Which is maybe not anything particularly profound as I'm saying it in real time. I'm realizing that. But what was the other thing you said? Shit, it's escaping me. Well, I'll just move on, and if I remember, I'll bring it up again. So you just wrote this book, The Pen Game Portfolio. What kind of motivated you to write the book? And can you maybe talk about some of the themes broadly that you kind of address in it?
Absolutely. So, man, the whole thing with the Pen Game Portfolio is kind of intertwined with what we just talked about, but just on a larger scale of music and hip hop, period, rather than just locally. So, the whole idea was that I had been trying to educate artists for the last 2 years through events, and I would put on these events called the Songwriter Social Club, and we would talk about all of the elements of songwriting. We would talk about all of the elements of publishing your own music, self-releasing your own music. I would have producers come in. I would have engineers come in, music managers, all of these different people. But I could only do it so often with the partner that I had. It was like a quarterly thing, and you would get people that express an interest in coming, but then the day of, stuff happens and all that type of stuff. So it just came to a point where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take this information and I'm just gonna put it out in the form of an ebook, to where you can always have access to it. I don't have to be standing in front of you or have a group of people there in order for you to get this information. So I started putting it together, and the main thing was that I've experienced so much, I've learned so much just because I had to. Like when I was coming out, I've been doing music for a long time. I was just going through all this stuff. The other day I made a compilation video. My first music video came out in 2008.
I think I saw that compilation video pop up in my feed, but I didn't get a chance to watch it.
Yeah, so from 2008 to 2021, like there's a lot of information, a lot of ups and downs in that time period that I didn't know was working in my favor. I just thought that, man, my career is taking so long, but I learned so much independently that I kind of was breeding myself for the era that we're in today, because I had to be independent even when it wasn't the cool thing to be.
I feel the same way.
Now
you're speaking to me right now,
Got you. Yeah, man. So but that gives you so much information that you can give to other people, because now that's the thing to do, so many other people are coming behind and they don't have that information and they're just kind of winging it. And, you know, not everybody is great at researching things on the internet and having discernment to know what's real, what's not, what's true, what's being, you know, misleading information. So I just wanted to try to compile something that could be like a guide or a handbook that can at least get people started. I'm not saying that I know everything. I'm not saying I'm the smartest person or a guru in music, but I have some information that I feel is valuable. And I think at the very least, it'll help somebody at least build their foundation until they're ready to bring other people into what they're doing. Yeah, no, that I hear that, and that it's really cool that you've put it together. And so, like, when you're talking about, you know, doing music for 10 years, I mean, that's a, you know, similar length of time that I've been at it, and what you're saying, you just accumulate all this information, and you know, you kind of wish you learn things. You're like, man, I wish I had known this all along, or you know, wow, like this crazy way of living that was really crazy in the beginning is now working for me because the world has changed. Or, you know, like, what were the types of, like, we learn things from making mistakes. And I think being a musician, a music, you know, recording artist, whatever, for as long as we have, there's these different mistakes you make through which you acquire this information. Is there any like certain road bumps that you that were particularly salient to you in your journey that kind of influenced or you know like gave you the most important lessons? Early on, I learned communicating with like the press was very important, but also how you communicate with the press. I came into things not knowing the proper way to reach out to somebody. I made the mistakes of like, you know, CCing 50 different publications without, you know, putting the blind CC on it. So people are like, why did you do that? And I'm like, I didn't know how to change it. You know what I'm saying? So stuff like that. I learned about, I mean, there was a time period when blogs were the primary way that you got heard. And I had a run of getting exposure on a lot of those blogs. And then one day, all of the main ones that I was getting support from got bought out by Complex, and either they no longer existed or the format in which they existed no longer was how they were, you know? So that support line got cut out as soon as the bigger corporation came in and said, all right, we like what you're doing. We're going to put money into it, but this is how you need to do it now. So all those guys you used to have on here, don't worry about them. So that was a whole thing, you know, like how do I continue, because the way that I thought was correct is no more. Brutal. Streaming then became the thing, and I've still to this day am not a fan of streaming, you know, I'm just not. But at the same time, it's like, okay, in a streaming world, how do you survive? Because you don't have the guarantee of, hey, if somebody likes my music, they're going to buy it from me now. So that's where doing all of the sync placements and doing the songwriting for other people. And, you know, man, I write songs for not just other people, but I also write songs for businesses as well. So that became my primary way of like, okay, if that's what y'all want to do with the industry, I'm going to build my own industry within my own skill set. No, that's cool. I'm glad that you kind of figured out a way to commandeer it, and make it work for you. But I really vibe with what you're saying. Like having to adjust. Like the music industry is like constantly changing. Like if you look at like, say, you know, from LPs to cassettes to CDs to like MP3s to streaming, like even the amount of time between these different things is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And we like have to get used to just like always figuring out a new kind of way to make it work for us. I mean, would you say that you're against or not a fan of streaming? Would you say you're not a fan of streaming because of like the sort of normal, typical reasons that people list, like, you know, the streaming services don't pay artists enough, et cetera, or like it's the money. It's the money, yeah. Yeah. It's the money, man, because everything else is like perfectly convenient. Like as far as how easy it is, the ease of access, that is how it should be. Yeah. However, just because it should be easily accessible does not mean that the creators shouldn't be paid for it.
Yeah. It's
Like you still like put it like this, man. Like what was the movie that came out? Mulan or whatever it was. That came out and they made people pay it even through the streaming network that it went to. You still had to pay $30 to see it. And I feel like music should still have that element of value to it.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. It feels really brutal when you're like slogging away at making records is not easy. It's like interesting how like we put so much work into doing them, and some like I'm finishing up a project that's taking me 2 years, and when you're kind of slogging away at these things, it's crazy to think how much work you're doing, and then you realize that like it feels like it's of such little value when someone's kind of just like flipping through it on their playlist or like listening through like some weird like on their busted sound system or whatever it is.
Music is not free to create.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Another thing about the whole streaming world that's kind of tough is, especially, it's like a combination of the streaming and also like the algorithms where it really like favors like songs that just kind of like start with a bang and like kind of get you hooked in within like the first 10 30 seconds, like that window of time just keeps getting shorter. And so it also has that effect on music composition. And then if you want to be like a person that wants to make like an artsy, like, 10-minute orchestral work, you just have to be like, this is a thing that is going to be pretty niche and like not a lot of people are going to hear it, but I'm making it because it's like, satisfying. Do you write mostly now with like something like placement in mind? Like, is that like, would you say is your main grind, or do I have the wrong impression?
I don't mainly do that, but that's kind of like, well, I'll put it this way. Sync is not my main thing. Because, that's stuff that comes in a few times a year. I'm planning on having a big year with that this year, but generally it's a few times a year that comes through. But for the most part, the majority of what I'm doing today and what I've been doing for the last year and a half has been writing for other artists, companies, and then doing my own music, which has become more of a passion thing for me, because now I don't do the records that I put out on my own. I don't do that for money.
Yeah.
I can be as artsy as I want to be and say, hey, if you like this, here it is. Yeah. And then it's kind of like, making music for other people has become my quote unquote day job, That's the beauty of it. And this is why, like, I was looking forward to talking to you, because I kind of noticed this thing about you, like from just following the stuff that you post, where it's like, yeah, I can see that you have an interesting balance of like, doing work that's like kind of formal in the context of being an MC, and like very formal if you're writing for companies and stuff. And then on the other hand, like you just do constantly put out freestyles and stuff that seems more from the heart and of the moment as just like an expression. Yeah. And that striking that balance can be really hard. And I mean, I just told you about my experience at that weird production house. Yeah. So if you're, let's say you are writing, I want to take these different kind of modes of writing, like the passion stuff versus like you said companies and you said you're writing for other artists. So yes,
let's focus on the other artists first. Like, what is the like range, like type of situation, like when you're writing for another artist? Like is it just like straight up you're writing a verse and like ultimately like they have to spit it? Is there some other intermediate forms of like where you're collaborating with them? Like, what is that process like?
So there's a couple different ways of it happening. Most of the time, currently, it's artists that want to be performers. They want to be the artist, but they don't know how to write music. They have ideas, but they need it translated into song format. And that's where I kind of come in, and I I formulate the words and give them like the cadence and the rhythm, and you know, once it's in their hands, they're free to kind of figure out what they want to do with it on their own. So they can say it the same exact way that I did, or they can twist it and maneuver it if they want. That's kind of how I work. There's also instances where some people just want to have, you know, a good feature. So I'll give them a quote unquote J Nolan feature on their songs. You know, that happens as well. But for the most part right now, it's mostly balanced between literally writing songs for artists that don't know how to write songs and making songs that basically represent businesses or you know, teams of people and things of that nature.
When it comes to businesses and teams of people, would I be correct in saying pretty much you're looking for like a coherent brief, and like, you know, just do the thing that's in the brief basically, and
yeah, exactly. So like I'll give you a direct example. Just yesterday, I've sent in a song that was made for a team of employees that worked at like a Capital One cafe. It was made for like the regional team, so it wasn't formally through Capital One. It was just through like somebody in management that wanted to make a song to encourage the regional employees or whatever.
yeah.
They had a tough year with COVID and, you know, their employment situation last year, and they just wanted to make something that was reflective of what they experienced. And I had to translate all of those feelings and events into a song. Right now I have a project that, this company that, you know, I guess they're an alternative to people getting plastic surgery on their nose. You know, they want a theme song of some sort for that company. Small business, but they just want to have a musical element to what they do. So that's pretty much how it works. And then recently I did something on a more formal scale as far as sync. You know, I worked with a cable, I wouldn't even say cable company, but a cable service provider in London. You know, they needed a song to go in their advertisement campaign that's going to be dropping very soon. So I ended up having to, they sent like a reference song. It was a Lil Wayne song, and they kind of liked my voice because sometimes I kind of go into this zone where I kind of sound like Lil Wayne a little bit. So they were like, oh, he'd be perfect. This is what we're trying to do. And I ended up creating it. We had to go through a few different revisions or whatever, but we ended up finding, you know, the perfect medium that they wanted. And very soon it'll be going out on every channel within that, you know, cable network.
That's very cool.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, like that. It seems like there'd be a lot of interesting variety in just that kind of space. So that's really fascinating. Like now, I'm wondering if somebody's hiring you to like make to create a verse, do they send you like a beat as well, or do you like have to go looking for a beat, or like an instrumental, or do you make them yourself, or like how does that work?
It's a mixture. So my preference is that people come with their own beats and instrumentals. Therefore, it takes away from me having to do extra work.
Yeah.
Or, you know, in some instances, even have to pay money before I get paid to get instrumentals for
brutal.
what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, so my preference is that they come with their own. Now, that's not always the case. But if I had it my way, that would be at all times.
Yeah, it's almost a shocker, like when, like to us, sort of seasoned music production people, it's just a shocker when they would, if they're approaching a lyricist and not having like an instrumental in mind, or at least like a reference.
Right.
But you know, people in the corporate world are in a different world from us often.
Yeah, even artists, they may
true.
have
That's
like
true. You're not
they
even
may
wrong.
have an idea, but they may not have put the time in to be like, let me get the beat, or maybe they don't have producers within their network just yet, or
Yeah.
the producers that they know may be like charging a price that they can't afford. So there's a number of things that will contribute to it. I try to be as understanding as possible because I know every level of how it works.
Yep.
But it can be frustrating sometimes, when somebody just does not have anything together. It's just like, I want to be a rapper. And it's like, okay, that's great, but you got to give me some direction in order to help you the best way that I can.
I've certainly met a few artists like that as well, and you're absolutely right. It does actually happen a lot, even with artists. Sometimes you get some really strange requests, and people will definitely send you some pretty weird demos. But so that's also interesting. So like not only is there like a variation in different types of projects, but there's a variation also in like the type, like the different levels of formality that you might encounter depending on what type of client you're working with. And that's like interesting from the point of view of being musicians, because as musicians, we have a reputation of being like a little bit like, sometimes flaky, to use a word, but it's like we've all interacted with people like that, and sometimes you accidentally end up being that way because it's hectic and it's like we're freelancers and all of the reasons. And so if you yourself, and I feel the same way. Like as a producer, I feel like stuck in between the world of like being like a disorganized like musician artist type, but also being the person that has to like get the project together and make sure it happens. So like I feel often like I'm in both worlds. Like I can be both ways, and it's a thing. So you're experiencing like these different levels of formality where like, let's say that cable company in London, like they're probably, had a process together or whatever. And then on the other hand, on the other hand, you might have an artist that really like doesn't know what's going on, and you're trying your best to be understanding. So what are what are some of the takeaways that you can kind of give to people in terms of having certain things together? Like what are the basic things that like an artist that's starting out, or even an artist that's not just starting out but like doesn't have it together? What are some things that you think that people, sort of like that blind CC thing you were talking about? Anything else?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I would encourage any artist to get a grasp on is how your PROs, your performance rights organizations, your publishing, and all of that stuff, how it works. Get an understanding of that, because when you're coming into this thing and you're expecting people to help you out, like, there is also a level of, hey, the splits have to be right as well in order to move forward. Like there's cases, like with me, sometimes I don't even ask, because it's like, whether it pops off or not, I don't really care. But in other instances, you have to kind of put your foot down to be like, hey man, like in the instance of like this one artist, she was brand new, and off the bat, she was like, I love your style. I love what you do. I want you to help me write an album. And it's like, okay, that's great, but I'm definitely going to need, some formal paperwork to do all of that. Like we can't just have, this portal of agreements and stuff like that. Like this is going to have to be a little bit deeper. I need to be compensated on the back end for sure.
That's a great phrase, by the way. Sorry to cut you off. There's a really great phrase. Did you say portal of agreements?
Yes.
That's a great phrase. It like kind of very vivid description of that exact scenario. Like where it's like, no, that's cool. But anyway, sorry I cut you off. Continue what you're saying.
No, I get it. But yeah, so in instances like that where somebody is like, they want you to do a body of work for them, and they don't understand like what that means in future tense, like you kind of have to be like, all right, well, let me tell you how this works. But if you knew how it worked before we had this conversation, this would be a lot smoother, because I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to pigeonhole you or put you in a situation where, you don't understand, so you think I'm trying to get over on you.
Yep. Yeah. It's challenging, because also that process of working together with someone on a body of work, like it's hard to do that without kind of like getting to know them and like, you've developed this like, like every artist that I've produced an album with or band, like I'm just like really good friends with them because I spent so much time with them and all this kind of thing. And so, like if the financial stuff gets really murky, it can get very awkward and difficult to talk about these things. So it's really important to have some actual agreements rather than a portal of agreements or a vortex of agreements. Have like something concrete so that you know what's up. What do you think about like to do like things similar to like what you and I do? We all have to go through this process in the beginning when we're starting out, where you just kind of like have to do stuff like I mean for me like you can't like in the beginning you obviously can't just expect to get paid a whole lot. You doing lots of stuff for free just to show that you can do the damn thing. And there's like over the years, like, for me, it wasn't like a particular day when all of a sudden, although it probably was if I think about it, but like, it wasn't like a specific day when all of a sudden it's like, now, like, these are my rates. I just like, from doing more and more projects, all of a sudden, like, I kind of like, it's sensible now. It like went from being like totally ridiculous to like, 10 plus years on, it's like sensible. And also, there's like so many different like ways you can approach getting paid. Like if you're working with somebody on a body of work, like you can like look at it time wise, like, okay, like we're going to get together with like for X amount of sessions. So you can to write this so we can charge by the session, or like, it's this many songs. So we're going to charge this much because it's this many songs, like all these different ways of setting up payment. So have you experienced, I mean, and you don't have to talk about this if you don't want to. I mean, I should just say that as well. But have you experienced like a process of developing like a payment scheme? You don't have to necessarily reveal yours, but like a process of like figuring out what type of scheme works for you as an artist who's trying to do something creative, trying to work together with somebody in the way that we described, and just making sure that this financial stuff like is solid and stable.
Got you. Well, in the forums in which I'm doing all of this stuff, like it's already understood that they're gonna have to pay me a certain rate up front. But in terms of like my personal projects, that's where things are a little different because I have friends that produce and we'll like get in the studio and it'll just be like, man, not paying for these sessions necessarily. But it's like, all right, this is the agreement. When it comes out, this is what everybody's percentages are going to be. And any capital investments that need to go into this, everybody's contributing to it equally. So we're just going to receive equally. You know what I mean? Not everybody works like that. And I understand that, that's the added benefit of like working with your friends that also understand business.
Yep.
So you can say, all right, nobody's going to come into it spending any money or feeling like at the end of the day, you did more or this person contributed more. We're all working on equal planes, so we all deserve equal shares. That's how I would prefer to work with most people. Yep. But of course, there are also instances where, I'm going through a situation now where I have a song that I did for mainly for sync purposes, but there's a producer that actually is in the industry, well known, and we're trying to work out the proper split situation in order to get the ball rolling on the actual record so we can get it out there. And there's a contributor to the project who we just can't seem to get in touch with right now. So it's holding up the process on like, all we have to do is get a solid agreement and we can move forward. But there's one piece that we just can't seem to get in contact with, and it's holding everything up.
All right. Well, that's a bummer, but also it's a thing that sounds familiar. I mean, I definitely remember just from the point of view of like wanting to put stuff out and like a release getting held up because maybe somebody on the project like all of a sudden they weren't into the track anymore or something, or like you have somebody like this sitting on a beat for ages. That was especially difficult back when I knew less like artists that I could shop around my beats to, And it was more. It was also more distressing back when I really just needed to put something out for myself as like a hey, like But also, the big thing that's changed for me since I moved to India is that I really like learned how to make beats for fun that don't necessarily require a vocalist. Like before, I used to really rely on making like loops and then I would need like a vocalist, like MC or singer, to come and put some like vocals down so that I could like sequence the beat and chop up the beat around it to make it like a composition, and that was great practice. But moving over here, like over the last several years, I've just been learning how to like make beats that kind of can just exist on their own. And so that's cool. Like I feel like liberated from like the pressure of I can't even like show this to people or like upload it or whatever if I don't like have vocals on it. Like that's cool.
Right.
But I do miss working with MCs. So it's something I'd like to get back into soon. So if you're writing for sync, and you're writing for like sync in mind, what kind of like what's the range of different types of beats right now, and like what are the types of places? Like I remember, was it Kevin Hart or yeah. So like what are the different types of places where you might get placed, and what's the range of beats and instrumentals that you would be looking to do if you're writing just for that purpose?
To be honest, man, it's kind of like almost like Euro trap beats.
Euro trap, that's great.
Yeah, because it's not like Atlanta trap, It's like almost so like who's an example I could use? Like I guess Skrillex kind of beats or
really
stuff like that, but they want you to rap on it,
Huh.
That's I would say not to like the fast tempo, but like more of the, it's kind of got a bounce to it.
Yeah.
But it still has like elements of the EDM stuff in it.
Right.
Those are very, 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 very popular. Those have been the primary tracks that have gotten synced as of recent. That's kind of what it was in the Kevin Hart one, and we didn't even make that specifically for Kevin Hart. That's the beautiful thing about the world of sync as well, because a lot of these songs that have been getting picked up in new projects were completed like 2-3 years ago, and they still have life now, and they're actually getting picked up, and we're getting paid off of that stuff. So it's not even like work on our end, because it was already done. So that's been cool. Some of my earlier work was more gritty hip hop stuff, like even like kind of outside of my normal scope of what I do. But they wanted stuff that kind of like would fit in crime dramas, or a scene right before a confrontation, or things of that nature. So those types of songs got picked up as well. That sounded kind of like I always equate it to like a generic Cool G rap or something, a generic version of what he would do. I just had to do a little bit of that recently because we're trying to get some music placed on the next spinoff for Power. We're trying to get some stuff. They're doing like a BMF series. So we had to do some stuff that would be befitting of, because that's like crime drama stuff. So it kind of put me back into that space of doing those types of songs, especially because they wanted production that sounded like it could have existed in the 90s. So that's generally the range that I get hit with. It's either going to be kind of like the bouncy EDM thing or this gritty hip hop type of thing. Sometimes it could be inspirational as well, but I've noticed that I don't know if it's the songs that I create when I'm trying to be inspirational or whatever the case may be, but those have not been the ones that got synced.
Perhaps it's more a sign of the strange times that we are living in. Okay, maybe
yeah, but
people,
even when they want that type of sound, I
Yeah.
guess they'll end up going in a with something else, or they may still fit, it may fit that, but they may say, for an inspirational scene, maybe we don't need rap. Maybe we'll just have an R&B song there, or this type of song, or a pop song.
is that you kind of like maybe taking a guess at what these folks are thinking, or do they actually like give you this kind of feedback?
They won't tell us how the cues work out.
Yeah.
But I just know that every time I got hit with like hey, let's do an inspirational song, they've never been used.
Interesting. When somebody I just find this world really interesting because I don't have a lot of experience with it. When you say like they hit you with like who's the they? Like, is it a producer or is it like and are you?
Now, most of my interactions are with producers,
Okay.
because the producers that I work with are already they have a lot of relationships in the sync world, so even if I wasn't involved, they would be getting tracks placed. It's just like, hey, they're looking for, an MC to get involved with this project. They want hip hop. So they'll be like, yo, let's do it. That's pretty much been how it works out for me a lot of the time. Even with like the cable network, that was fostered through the producer that I work with, because he's already involved in that scene. It's just that they already had heard my voice prior to opening up what they were looking for. So they were like, there's going to be other artists trying to get this same spot, but we are favorable to the texture of his voice. So if he delivers, he'll probably get it,
That's pretty specific feedback, but I guess it also makes sense for that type of environment.
Yeah.
So, okay, you were saying about the music that you're doing more for passion. Is that
Yes.
something that, I mean, I'm sure you've been doing it for ages, but since like the world has been in this weird pandemic situation, have you found more time to kind of do that? Can you tell me about maybe what that process is and what you might have in the works?
Absolutely. So last year, before, I caught COVID myself in December.
How
So,
did you? I mean, did you
prior
get the
to-
worst of it, or was it like a?
I didn't get the worst of it,
Yeah.
gladly. So like I had a rough time. It was like I had fevers, I had a lot of sweating going on, I lost a lot of fluid, so I had to go like to the urgent care and get like an IV placed in me because I was just losing too much fluid from sweating.
Oh wow.
Excuse me. Like really severe headaches and stuff like that, but I was able to recover within about 3 weeks.
Okay.
But prior to that happening, I was pretty much in the studio creating. So I think they may not be completely done, but I'm about 85 to 90% done with like 3 separate projects that I'll be rolling out through the course of this year. And those are personal J Nolan projects. I actually have a single next week dropping called Bad Vibes. So that's going to be like the beginning of everything coming out. And following after that, I'm going to have a series of singles that are dropping with this production duo called Dope Norteria. And then I have another project called Cool Heads Prevail that'll be coming out. It's an EP. And then I have another project that I've been working on with the producer by the name of DJ Red Handed. We have almost a full album done. And even outside of that, I've been recording my own stuff at home that will probably contribute to another full-length project somewhere down the line. But the stuff that I'm doing will probably end up being released periodically as singles, at least a few of them. So I've been definitely working on a lot, because I've just had nothing but time. Back when this hit in last March, I was still working full time. I haven't worked since March at my occupation. I don't plan on ever going back now that I've been able to build my foundation outside of that, which is also another reason why I put out the Pen Game portfolio, because I was able to document how things changed within pretty short period of time, and I was able to give that right back to artists to say, hey, if you just, take this information and run with it, like, I know it works because it worked for me. And I'm not, like I said before, I'm not the smartest person in the world. So just about anybody can do it. As long as you have talent, you can do it.
That's awesome. It sounds like you have like a lot of things lined up. It's going to be a big year, so I'm looking forward to hearing all this stuff. The book. Where can people? I mean, I want to continue talking about your
Absolutely
these projects and maybe find out a little bit more of the sound. But just before I forget, where can people get your ebook?
Right now, you can get it at realjnolan.com. That is the only place that it's available as of now. And I'm looking forward to like getting it on Audible and all of the different places where you can get ebooks and audiobooks. But right now it's at realjnolan.com. You get it directly through me, and I have the ebook version that you can download. It'll come in a PDF format, and I also have an audio version already on the website that you can get as well if you're someone that just wants to hear it on the go and don't have the patience.
That's
to
great.
read.
I'm assuming you recorded the audio yourself, like it's you talking?
Yep.
I recently got into audiobooks. Like I still mostly just read regular books, but I recently discovered the joy of when a book, like an audiobook, is recorded by the actual author instead of just some random person. I mean, those can be fine too, I guess. But when it's the actual author, especially if it's somebody that you've heard on a podcast or you like kind of know them as an author, it's just great when it's the author. So I didn't know there was an audiobook component. It obviously makes sense if you got a mic at home. So that's cool. So I want to know if you're willing to talk about it a bit more about like, so you named a couple of different projects with like a couple of different producers, a few different producers, and so like how are they different? How are they similar? What type of things are you expressing? Like what's on your mind? What's going on? And how much of it do you want to reveal? I guess.
Well, what I would say is each project has a different sound for sure. Like the Cool Heads Prevail project, to me, that's kind of like an intermediate range between like the 2000s hip hop that raised me and like what's going on today. So there's kind of a mix of styles. With the project I did with Dope Norteria, those will just be rolled out as a series of singles. Each song has a different sound with that as well. So you're going to have a pretty wide range. You're going to have like some stuff that feels like, Dirty South era Atlanta. You're going to have stuff that sounds, hip hop. You're going to have some stuff that sounds kind of upbeat. It's just a variation of things. Even like somewhat trappish. The project with DJ Red Handed is purely hip hop, 90s type of style, pretty much like very to the roots, like dope samples, dope drums, dope rhymes type of thing. And then the project,
I love how that's the easiest way to describe. I love how that's the easiest way to describe the 90s sound. It's like I came up in the 90s, so it's like, well, I agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah.
It was all dope. Go on.
It's all good. But and then there's like another side project that I'm doing just in the house, and that's kind of if I had to say anything, it would kind of be blending of just everything that I like, man. So it's hard to pigeonhole it. I would just tell people to stay tuned, and I think no matter where you stand in terms of taste, I think that you'll find something that you like, whether it be the subject matter, the metaphors, because I'm big on those, or just like the beats itself.
Well, that's super interesting, and so I don't know which thing to ask you first. Hopefully I'll remember both questions because it seems like I'm having a bad memory day. But first thing I wanted to ask you is, you said you came up on 2000s rap, just not even getting into like lyricism yet. Like in terms of beats and stuff, is there a particular era or like even like location in terms of type of sound that like really connects with you primarily, or like a range? Can you talk about your preference in
Yeah, I mean, being that I was, I was raised in the 90s, so raised in 90s, 2000s, so those definitely have a place in my heart that I've always gravitated to, especially the more jazzy style of production. Like when I got into doing my own thing, I went years of just rapping over jazz sampled beats, There was a time period where I wanted to, rap over anything that sounded like Rockefeller, Jay-Z, Cameron, Beanie Siegel style of beats. There was a time period where, well, that was a long time period actually. I probably did that for like 8 years.
That was
but
a good era also. Good
yeah,
snapshot. Yeah.
So
yeah.
yeah, so that's my foundation. But I've always been a fan of so many other styles of hip hop. I've always been just a student of hip hop. So whether it was West Coast, East Coast, South, Midwest, like my favorite rappers are a collection of all of those regions, all of those different styles. I've never been one dimensional because I've lived in almost each of those places. I lived on the East Coast, I lived on the West Coast, and now I'm in the South. So I've always had to respect, what was coming out of where I was living at.
Yeah. So then, kind of turning to like lyrical influences. Like, what are some of the MCs that really stand out to you that maybe kind of shaped your evolution?
Man, too many to really name, but I can start with
fair enough.
I always say the foundation of who J Nolan is kind of was founded upon the honesty of Tupac, the depth of knowledge and lyricism of like a Nas, and the thoughtfulness and like the imagination that I was introduced to through Lupe Fiasco. Those are like the guys that really formulated my understanding of hip hop. And there's a lot of others that went into that as well. But we'd be going all day.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a fair enough when someone asks you who your favorite MC is. Like, I find I can only I can list a few names and then it just gets out of control. So yeah, fair enough. So that you mentioned the honesty of Tupac and these kind of adjectives. I guess those are adjectives.
Yeah.
So how does that apply to maybe the types of things you want to express on these projects that you're like that are more passion projects? Like what has been on your mind, and what types of themes can we expect?
To be honest, it's like it's such a range. I've written lyrics that are reflective of what's going on in the States as far as this whole COVID-19 situation, just from the perspective of somebody who's like watching it and seeing people not taking it seriously or whatever the case may be. I have songs that are just fun. I have songs that are made, like I said, have like a more dirty South feel to it. And when I say dirty South, I definitely mean like, UGK, Goody Mob, kind of vibe. So it just depends, man. Like what I've been doing over the course of the last year, I haven't been trying to give myself like hard subjects to write about. I've just been giving myself the room to create freely and within any moment, just say what's on my mind or how I feel or what I want to express. So it's not like, I'm talking about XYZ. It's just like we went in the studio and just created with a clean slate, and whatever I said in that session is what stuck. You know what I mean? And I've gotten more into that place as a creator because I've been doing music for so long that it's boring to me to just be like, plus within my own, doing work for other people, I'm always working within the confines of, the subject matter that's presented to me. So when I'm doing my own stuff now, I just kind of feel like, man, let's just wing it.
It's more stream of consciousness.
Yeah, it's like I'm kind of getting into a place where I find myself being not so much improvisational in the format that I'm not writing anything down or not thinking, but it's definitely more improvisational than I was in the past. I feel like I was very formulaic when I was younger.
Well, I relate to a lot of what you're saying because like for me now, like because I'm producing these like rock albums and stuff, for me now beat making has just become a very stream of consciousness. Like let me just do it for the sake of doing it. Like my latest kind of solo release was a beat tape that was very much made with that type of intention in mind. Like there's this, I don't know if you know of it, there's this YouTube series called Against the Clock. I don't know why they didn't call it Beat the Clock, but it's called Against the Clock. And they have like these, all these different, like very well-known producers, like electronic and or hip-hop producers from a variety of subgenres. And they like, you know, go to their place and film them. And there's like, you got to make a beat in 10 minutes. And when I saw that, it really inspired me because I was like, man, in any given day, I have 10 minutes, like, you know, to sit down and just do something. And just do, and it kind of brings me back to the to your freestyles that you kind of put out on a regular basis. Like I experienced that with the beat making, where it's like I'm not making this for anyone. I'm just making this for fun, for practice, for just myself and enjoyment. And you know, I would just find like a random tune, like that I heard, like you know, in India, you'll be, and you know, like old Bollywood music is like really good source material for samples. So you'd be on the street here, and like you're sitting in the back of a rickshaw, and you hear some old Hindi song. So I would just like Shazam that, go home, download it, dump it into like Ableton, and without even like any idea of what I wanted to make, I would just start chopping it up and trying something. And it's amazing how good that can feel when you're like your main gig or a big project is you're working for somebody else. Like you're writing for these specifications. So I really relate to that. So you mentioned in your influences, like obviously there's lots and too many to name in terms of favorites and stuff. But like you mentioned Nas, Tupac, and Lupe Fiasco. And I guess, would I be correct in saying that Lupe Fiasco has this like backpacker vibe, or is that? Would you say he's kind of in that?
I guess you could say that.
Yeah. So in terms of like the lanes that you were talking about earlier, like I know this is like a more of your passion kind of thing. Do you feel any? Do you feel any pressure yourself to be in a particular lane, or because like since this is something you're doing for passion, do you feel like you can just kind of more freely make whatever you want? Like, is there a tension there or not?
Today, not at all. I don't feel any pressure to do anything outside of being myself.
Yeah.
When I was, like I said, when I was younger, I kind of worried about, if I say this, what are people going to say to that? If I do a song that's outside of the realm of what they're accustomed to hearing from me, how are they going to react? Are they going to like it? Now, I don't care.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like so many times when I was worried about that stuff, people still ended up liking it anyway. So I was worried about nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am often surprised sometimes when I would make a composition that I just didn't even think about, and people like sometimes like Emcee would choose that beat that I forgot about or didn't think was particularly good, and like, this is awesome. So you like kind of never know what people will like. So it's just good to kind of just create. Another thing I wanted to ask you is, so like those freestyles that you post, do those ever end up in songs, or are they kind of like a zen, like you let them go kind of thing?
I kind of leave them where they at. I think a couple of them have. I think I may have used a couple of them for like feature verses for other artists. But as far as like using it for my songs, I wouldn't do that because they're just long verses. Like I don't even know how I would even format them into a song. Cause like each one of those videos, I think they go at least like 2 minutes of just straight rhymes. And I don't release songs like that no more, where I'm just rhyming all over the place, no chorus, no anything. You know, I'm kind of, when I make music today, I'm more so trying to actually make music. You know what I'm saying? So when I do the freestyles, it kind of gets me back into like, you know, when I was a kid, just rapping for the sake of rapping and saying like the craziest punchlines I could think of. You know, it's just kind of like straight fun. I can't really see those fitting into like the structure of an album.
Interesting. Cool. Well, I really look forward to hearing these projects, and I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with me. I'm glad I'm finally getting the chance to talk to you. I've been admiring your work for some time.
Thank you.
And so, I mean, we'll wrap it up, and I'll send you some instructions on how to send me this audio.
Okay.
Done. Yeah. Take care, man. You have a good one.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.